Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tiger podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Goraj. I am here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold, being held hostage in the state of Florida for yet another week as spring training rolls on, and hopefully shortly, Evan, we will be playing some meaningful baseball. But there was a lot of fun stuff in the last week. Televised 3 games. Got to watch the Tigers brutalize 2 teams on television. Let's go over the last week.
Yeah, a lot has happened down here in Lakeland, Florida. The Tigers have now played 15 spring training games as of Monday morning. You're right, 3 games were on TV this past week. Wednesday against the Phillies on ESPN. Friday against the Orioles on FanDuel Sports Network Detroit Extra, and Saturday against the Blue Jays on Sportsnet. So while I've been watching every game, fans got to see some pretty cool things in those games. Let's recap. In Wednesday's 17-7 win over the Phillies, Jahmai Jones, Andy Ibanez, and Gleyber Torres hit back-to-back-to-back home runs on 3 consecutive pitches from left-hander Jesus Luzardo, all with Phillies manager Rob Thompson on the headset during an in-game interview with ESPN. I also love the in-game interview with ex-Tiger Cody Clemens, who plays for the Phillies now, and his father, Roger Clemens. That was really fascinating. Cody was playing first base. Roger was standing in right field. I thought it was pure genius from ESPN, and it happened in a long 3rd inning in which the Tigers scored 6 runs. So it was a lot of fun because those 2 guys were going back and forth talking, father, son, Roger Clemens, Cody Clemens, for quite some time there in that inning. So, but the big highlight was 3 homers on 3 pitches from the Tigers in the 2nd inning. In Friday's 11-7 win over the Orioles, Spencer Torkelson hit 2 home runs as part of a 3-hit game. He hit both home runs off right-hander Dean Kramer. The first was a 93.1 mile-an-hour fastball to right field for a solo home run. The second was an 83 mile-an-hour splitter to left center field for a solo home run. The first one that went to right field, it would have been a homer in just one MLB ballpark, that's Yankee Stadium. The second one that went to left center field would have been a homer in 24 of the 30 ballparks, including Comerica Park. Good to see that from Torque. He now has 3 home runs in 9 games in spring training. We will see how it translates to AAA Toledo. But the real story from Friday's game was Casey Mize, and we'll talk more about him later on, but here's a teaser. It was the best Casey Mize has pitched since the Tigers selected him number 1 overall in the 2018 draft. Stay tuned for more on that. In Saturday's 5-0 loss to the Blue Jays, Jackson Jobe made his 3rd appearance in spring training. He walked the last 2 batters. He only had 1 strikeout, and his whiff rate was just 16%. All 3 disappointing things to me. But on the positive side, he allowed just 1 hit, which was such a non-hit that it almost shouldn't have counted. And he completed 3 2/3 scoreless innings. And he struck out Vladimir Guerrero Jr. with 3 fastballs in a row. 98 mile-an-hour fastball for a foul, 98.3 mile-an-hour fastball for a swinging strike, and 97.3 mile-an-hour fastball for a swinging strike. After the game, Jackson Jobe explained why he approached Guerrero with 3 consecutive fastballs. Here's what he said.
I'm done with trying to dot the next dash. Just here's my stuff. You hit it great. And odds are you're probably not. So threw him 2 heaters. He was late on both of them. So threw another heater and got him. So it's not bad.
The Dot on Nats ask quote went viral on social media, and I get what Jobe is saying. He's saying it's important for him, with the individual pitches he has, as good as they all are, to attack inside the strike zone rather than dance around the strike zone. When you nibble, you walk guys. When you attack, you beat guys. However, Jackson Jobe, I promise you, Vlad Jr. can hit your 97, 98 mile-an-hour fastball in the zone. Vlad Jr. hit 323 with 30 home runs last season and is a 4-time All-Star. The Tigers and Blue Jays play each other in mid-May and in late June. I'm sure that might be some bulletin board material for Mr. Vlad Jr. if he needs any. Other notes from this week, injury updates. Matt Vierling, he remains out with a strained rotator cuff muscle in his right shoulder, already ruled out for opening day, which almost guarantees Wencio Perez makes the team. Parker Meadows still has a right upper arm nerve issue. He hasn't been ruled out for opening day yet, but if the nerve in his arm doesn't reactivate by the end of this week, I think the Tigers are going to have to rule him out for opening day, which would put Jahmai Jones in position to make the team. That nerve, it needs to spark within the next, say, 5 to 7 days if we want to see Parker Meadows in center field on March 27th against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Speaking of Wencio Perez, he scared us a little bit with lower back tightness. He's dealt with that multiple times over the past 3 years, most notably in 2022 and 2023. He missed 6 games over a stretch of 7 days, but he said he was going to be in the starting lineup for Monday's game. Expect him to play a lot of center field without Parker Meadows and Matt Vierling, possibly as the opening day center fielder, depending on Parker Meadows' status. Tigers also made an acquisition, signing injured right-hander José Urquidy to a 1-year, $1 million contract with a $4 million club option for 2026. The club option includes up to $3 million in performance bonuses, so the contract essentially maxes out at 2 years, $8 million. Urquidy is recovering from Tommy John surgery on his right elbow, which he underwent in June of 2024. The Tigers expect him to be ready by the end of the 2025 season, which would make him available for the postseason. That's a good thing. But this signing is more about the 2026 season because of the injury timeline and the club option. Here's a fun note on José Urquidy, by the way. He has pitched in the World Series in 2019, 2021, and 2022, winning the World Series in 2022. More importantly, though, he has a 1.23 ERA with 1 walk and 15 strikeouts and 14 2/3 innings in his World Series career spanning 5 games. Maybe the Tigers will need some José Urquidy World Series magic in 2025 or 2026. A lot has happened this week, but that is your Detroit Tigers week in review.
Gotta like the Urquidy signing, a crafty veteran, not a huge strikeout guy, but over 2 years, been very good in both years. He's been healthy, has not been healthy in quite some time, but you never know when pitchers are going to get healthy. And if he does, that's a solid back end of the rotation addition. You gotta like the subtle, shrewd idea of acquiring a guy like that. Kudos to the front office for jumping on that one. All right, let's jump in to the big two. Question 1 of the big two. What player is most integral to the Tigers' success in 2025? And we're going to answer that by putting the little fact of let's not include Tarik Skubal in that discussion, okay? Because I think that's just way too obvious. So what player do you think is most integral to the success of the Tigers in 2025, Ev?
Yeah, question 1 of the big two, inspired by David Lorola from Fangraphs. Every Sunday, David publishes his Sunday Notes column. And this past week, he asked me that exact question about the Tigers, and he included my analysis in his column. I picked Parker Meadows. Here's my analysis that was featured in Fangraphs. I'll read it word for word. It's easy to point to Tarik Skubal, but no player is more crucial to the Tigers' success this season than Parker Meadows, their leadoff hitter and center fielder. Just look at last season. Detroit posted a .653 winning percentage in games he started, and an even better .738 mark when he recorded a hit. After making a swing adjustment in AAA Toledo, he hit .299 with an .857 OPS over his final 50 games, signaling a potential long-term breakout. Beyond his offensive upside, Meadows is an elite defender in center field and one of the fastest players on the bases. If he maintains above average production at the plate, he could be worth at least 4 FWAR in 2025, putting him among MLB's top 5 center fielders. The best starter in baseball takes the mound once every 5 days, but an elite center fielder impacts the game every day. If Meadows unlocks his potential, the Tigers' ceiling rises with him. That's what I wrote in Fangraphs. And Mark, I want to turn it around and ask you the same question that Fangraphs asked me. Which player is the key to the Tigers' success in 2025? And no, we're not counting Tarik Skubal.
So I will give the Days of Roar listeners a little brutal honesty. And Evan Petzold and I talk often. You asked me this question without telling me that you had spoken to the legend David Lorola. And when you asked me the question, my answer immediately was Parker Meadows. So when it comes to understanding the real straw that stirred the drink in 2025, the person that had the most impact on the Detroit Tigers winning starting the first week in August, it was without question Parker Meadows. So many different ways to impact the baseball game. Great part is it doesn't always have to be with his bat. The better part is it was so often with his bat. But yeah, nobody jumps up over the fence more times like Superman. Nobody is a dervish on the bases, going first to home on balls hit in the gap. Nobody hits home runs off of Robert Suarez on pitches up at your shoulders at 100 to to win baseball games on the road, it's Parker Meadows. It's not even discussable. The question is, can somebody please wake up the nerve in his bicep, A, and B, will he play like that in 2025?
Live Days of Roar update. No Wencio Perez in the lineup for Monday's game, so maybe that lower back tightness that he's been dealing with is still bugging him. That's definitely not a good thing. You would have loved to see him in there, even at the designated hitter spot, just to get some swings off. He said he was going to play Monday, and he's not in Monday's lineup. So no Wencio Perez. He's going to miss his 7th straight game. But you mentioned Parker Meadows, you mentioned the injury. Like, that's why the Parker Meadows injury is like this dark cloud that hangs over Tigers spring training. He has the nerve issue in his arm. The nerve isn't working. No one knows when it's going to wake up. He's doing defensive work. He's doing conditioning. He's doing one-handed swinging with his non-lead arm. He was in the dugout for the first time in Sunday's game, but he hasn't been cleared to throw it all. And he hasn't been cleared to fully swing. Parker Meadows needs to be cleared to do those things in the next 5 to 7 days if he wants to play on opening day, which is only 17 days away. But so far, the nerve hasn't woken up yet. So Parker Meadows isn't doing baseball activities. And the impact of that injury, it really sets in if he can't go, because you have Wencio Perez taking Matt Vierling's spot, assuming Wencio Perez is going to be healthy, which I think he will ultimately get healthy before opening day. But then you probably have Jahmai Jones taking Parker Meadows' spot if it comes to that. And we'll see who wins the Spencer Torkelson versus Justin Henry Malloy roster battle. I still lean J-Hen pretty heavily. And the big question is this, though. Like, are the Tigers prepared to start Wencio Perez in center field for the first 10 days of the season, which is really only 8 games? That's saying that if Parker Meadows and Matt Vierling would start the season on the 10-day injured list, but then come back immediately after a stint on the 10-day IL. If one of those guys were to go on the IL and come back immediately, you're only really looking at like 8 games. I think the Tigers would be okay with Wencio Perez in center field for the first 8 games. But what if the injuries to Meadows and Vierling linger a little bit longer, and it's a month with Wencio Perez in center field? I do not think the Tigers would be okay with that. So you're talking about a stopgap in center field, like when they signed Jake Marisnick in 2023, or Riley Greene moves from left field to center field. The best way to maximize the offense is to move Riley Greene from left field to center field, play Kerry Carpenter in right field. Maybe J-Hen can stand out there in left field. Like, you got a lot of different options at that point. But the Tigers, at least manager AJ Hinch, doesn't want to move Riley Greene from left field to center field because the Tigers want to keep his legs as healthy as possible. And to do that, you minimize how much he runs, and you run way less in left field compared to center field. So you got to protect your best player, but you also need to win. It's a fascinating dilemma with Riley Greene in his outfield position if Parker Meadows remains injured. And I don't want to speculate too much because the nerve in Meadows' arm could spark in the next 5 days, and then he's going to be on the opening day roster. But if he doesn't, we're going to have a lot to talk about in next week's episode, because Parker Meadows being out for opening day would be a huge blow to this Tigers team, considering how valuable he is and how important he is to what this team does day in and day out as their everyday center fielder and their leadoff hitter.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see what happens. And more importantly, I think Scott Harris is probably already got a list of 2 or 3 veteran center fielders that are probably hanging on the bottom of people's rosters, signed minor league deals with other teams that would be easily obtainable, thinking along the lines of Michael Taylor, Manny Margot, guys like that would be more stable stopgap guys. You know, Jahmai Jones, they like to call him Jammy. You know, he's really looked good in spring training. Just don't know if he can play center field on a regular basis with Wencio Perez. Something to keep an eye on. Not a good way to start the 2025 baseball season. So let's hope we get a little good luck with Parker Meadows. Things spark up and he's ready to go. All right, let's go to question 2, the big 2. How good can this starting rotation become? Because we saw some things last week that were just awe-inspiring. I mean, swing and miss, dominant stuff, just a bad weekend for anyone rolling in. It was really, really impressive, and I don't think there's any doubt who the starting rotation is right now. I don't care how Kenta Maeda throws. It's just not happening. Let's talk about it.
Well, here's the starting rotation right now. It's Tarik Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Reese Olson, and Jackson Jobe, with these 3 pitchers competing for the final spot. Casey Mize, Kenta Maeda, Kader Montero. Right now, it seems like Montero more likely to start the season in AAA Toledo to polish his development, whereas the real battle comes down to Casey Mize, Kenta Maeda, who is in the starting rotation, who is in the bullpen. If it's Kenta Maeda in the rotation? Do the Tigers send Casey Mize to AAA Toledo, or do they put him in the bullpen? Casey Mize has had one really good start in spring training. Other than that, he hasn't done much since he's been drafted. Let's just be really, really honest when it comes to pure dominance, ace level type stuff. He's shown us that once, and it was his most recent outing, so let's not jump the gun on that. But we also have Alex Cobb and Sawyer Gipson-Long. They're on the injured list. What we know is what we can get from Skubal, Flaherty, and Olsen. I think to an extent, we know Jackson Jobe is going to experience his ups and downs in his rookie season. So you know what you're getting from Skubal, Flaherty, Olsen. You have an idea of Jobe. It's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster this season for sure. I don't think Jackson Jobe is going to have a Paul Skeens caliber rookie season, but how about Casey Mize emerging as a dark horse candidate to be a big piece of the starting rotation? We've given Kenta Maeda his flowers for his improvements in the last couple of podcast episodes, so I think we need to stick to Casey Mize here. What he did on Friday, March 7th, against the Baltimore Orioles at Publix Field at Joker Marchant Stadium is going into my books as the best I have ever seen Casey Mize. 3 scoreless innings, 1 hit, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts, only needed 35 pitches for 3 innings, so he simulated a 4th inning of work in the bullpen. He didn't like that, by the way. He wanted to stay in the game and keep pitching because he was shoving. Generated 11 misses on 19 swings for a 58% whiff rate with 4 fastballs, 6 splitters, 1 slider. His fastball averages 95.6 miles an hour. As for the splitter, the Orioles swung at 6 of them and missed at 6 of them. The splitter had a 100% whiff rate. I love what Casey Mize did from the moment he entered the game against Jackson Holliday, a left-handed hitter. He went up and in with a 95-mile-an-hour fastball for a foul ball. Then he dotted a 95-mile-an-hour fastball on the bottom rail of the strike zone for a called strike. And then he followed up with a 90-mile-an-hour splitter in the exact same location for a swinging strike. 3-pitch strikeout, fastball up and in, fastball down, splitter down. It reminded me of Kevin Gausman, who is exactly the kind of guy that Casey Mize is trying to emulate right now when it comes to the fastball and the splitter, using both of those pitches down in the zone together. The splitter, by the way, has increased in velocity. That started last September when Mize took it from 86 miles an hour to 88 miles an hour. But now it's gone to a whole new level from 88 miles an hour to 90 miles an hour. It's basically grip it and rip it at this point, which is different from when he was trying to spot his splitter in the past. He was trying to place it in certain spots. Now he's just throwing it as hard as he can, and it's a much firmer splitter than before, plays better off the fastball. So the new look Casey Mize is throwing fastballs at 96 miles an hour, splitters at 90 miles an hour, and then you're getting 3 variations of his slider. He also dropped an F-bomb after his start when talking about the competition in spring training for the final spot in the rotation. So Casey Mize definitely has an edge to him, and I absolutely love it. I said in the podcast last week, or maybe it was the week before, that Casey Mize could change my mind about the starting rotation battle. I've been saying Kenta Maeda all spring, but if Casey Mize can keep doing what he did Friday against the Orioles, and that's a big if because we have never seen him do it before, and he finally did it, and he did it in a very short, small sample. It was 35 pitches. If he can do that over and over again, then I think he will have changed my mind by the end of spring training, because what he featured, if he can do it again, is frontline starter type stuff. So yeah, like the rotation can be really good if Casey Mize figures out how to pitch like a frontline starter consistently, and Tarik Skubal is an ace, and Jack Flaherty pitches like an ace, and Reese Olson pitches like an ace, and Jackson Jobe shows flashes of ace potential. That's a high upside starting rotation. But for now, I can't wait to see Casey Mize in his next outing, which is Wednesday, March 12th against the Tampa Bay Rays in Lakeland. For that game, Mize will work as a starting pitcher rather than coming out of the bullpen, which is what he did Friday against the Orioles. Kiter Montero, by the way, is scheduled to start Friday, March 14th against the Pittsburgh Pirates in Bradenton.
All right. You know, when you say Casey Mize used F-bombs, you know who else used F-bombs when he was watching that? Me! I was using F-bombs because there was nothing else to describe what I was watching. It was dominant in the first inning he threw. It was okay in the second inning. And in the third inning, it was like, oh my goodness, what the F are we watching here? Because it was split after split after split after split. And I swear to God, I heard him swearing at hitters, I think, when he was just repeating splitters at 90. It was amazing to watch. It was like, where's this been for 5 years? The split now is dropping 4 more inches vertically, and it's dropping straight down. You and I have had this discussion. I've talked to, other people about this. It was like, where's this been? It's a whole different picture. What does it mean? Well, Casey Mize's whiff rate is 16%. It's massively below league average. It makes him ordinary at best. If he can raise his whiff rate from 16 to near 25, which is what 10 good splitters a game would do, he immediately would, ascend to being at Kevin Gausman's level. Kevin Gausman last year didn't even have a great year, and he was 3.1 WAR. So he actually has more upside than that and could probably emulate sort of the seasons that somebody like Pablo Lopez on the Twins is having. Same kind of whiff rate, which would be above 24%. And I think his whiff rate could get into the 20, 25, 26%. And the sky's the limit at that point. Casey Mize has never had a problem throwing innings. He's had a problem getting people out on a consistent basis. So this is just a whole new version of Casey Mize. Throwing harder, way better secondary pitch. We haven't even discussed if the slider will be effective, but I promise you, if he's throwing a split like this, his slider will be a heck of a lot more effective. So the tunneling aspect of the splitter paired with his fastball was just awe-inspiring. All right, let's also talk a little bit about what we saw, and I think we're not giving it enough emphasis. Reese Olson looked outstanding in his last outing, and it wasn't just the added velocity. There was definitely some improvement over 2024. Looked kind of like 2023 a little bit with his changeup. A lot more depth, a lot nastier. Talk to us a little bit about what you saw.
Yeah, Reese Olson has been great so far this spring training. Only 2 starts that he's made, but no walks, 6 strikeouts, 5 innings. Like, he's doing everything that you would expect him to do. And I think he's definitely taken a step forward in his development, and that's going to be a huge thing. I'm very fascinated to see what he does when we see him pitch deeper into games, when we see him get into the regular season. My biggest thing with Reese Olson has always been, like, he's got the slider that has a really good whiff rate. He's got the changeup that's got a really good whiff rate. So why isn't he striking more guys out? Like, why is his strikeout rate as low as it is? Like, he is somebody that, he was 8.1 strikeouts per 9 innings last year. Like, why is that not at 10 per 9 innings? Like, you feel like he would be that guy. Why was it 101 strikeouts over 112 in a third innings last season? Like, he's a guy that you would think would have more strikeouts than innings just based on his pure stuff. And I think a lot of that comes down to fastball and also some sequencing things too. So I'm going to be fascinated to see how Reese Olson fares once he gets into, pitching deeper into games, and then obviously the big league competition once we get into the season. But the stuff looks really good. The velo looks good. And Reese Olson's a great pitcher. Like, I'm not trying to knock Reese Olson, but I'm just saying, like, if there's one thing that's going to take Reese Olson from where he's at right now, which is a borderline all-star pitcher, to a great 1 or 2 type starter, if he could be that kind of a guy, multi-time all-star even, it's probably just getting more strikeouts. And I think he has the stuff to do it. It's just going to be about how he sequences and how he learns the pitch. But yeah, the body's moving great. He looks really good. All signs are pointing in the right direction for Reese Olson. I can't wait to see him back out there for his 3rd start.
Yeah, he looked outstanding. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we have the GOAT of baseball television broadcasting, the funniest, smartest, most glib guy in baseball TV broadcasting, Jason Benetti. We'll be back.
I'd like to welcome Jason Benetti, TV voice of the Detroit Tigers, to the Days of Roar podcast for the 2nd time. Jason, we had you on the show last spring training, so it's only right we do it again. Jason is now back for his 2nd season as the play-by-play broadcaster for the Tigers, and he's fresh off winning the Michigan Sportscaster of the Year award. Jason Benetti, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. This is my second time on a Tigers podcast.
Let's go. That's a good thing. Thank you for coming back. But hey, we mentioned the award. Can we just start right there? Like, Jason Benetti, 2024 Michigan Sportscaster of the Year, as awarded by the National Sports Media Association. You've won many awards, but to do so in your first year in Michigan, like, does that mean something special to you? And what's that like now to be an award winner in Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it is an everybody award, right? Because they don't give out like color analyst of the year. That just doesn't exist yet it's just like Sportscaster, and it tends to lean toward play-by-play. So, and it's a Tigers award as well, because, I doubt that happens if the Tigers don't get hot at the end of the season and people are throwing tomatoes at their television, but it takes a village in this way. And it's, you guys were telling me off the top, you had Andy on last week, and it's for all the analysts and all the reporters and for everybody. And I am honored that people enjoyed what they watched last year, because I think the most tenuous moment is in your first time with a new audience. Like I do all these like speaking engagements about first impressions based on how I walk and how easy, life becomes when you realize first impressions aren't the only thing. Well, like that doesn't make it any less nerve wracking when people are having a first impression of you as a new audience. And so, to have it go well enough to even be considered for something like that is a bit of a load off for me, because while I know and believe that I am a play-by-play announcer at heart, the audience has to like it. I mean, that's the way for any television show. That's like you can have a great run on a TV drama, and then you can throw out an episode that people pan so much that they kind of turn on your show. Sorry, Severance. I don't know if we're watching, but season 2, episode 8 just came out, and I'm in one of those, I don't know where we're going sort of situations. So I'm judgmental as well, evidently. But no, it's thank you for saying that. And it was an honor, and it remains an honor with all of the great sportscasters that are in a city that really does care about its sportscasting in like a very detailed way. Like, you miss something, people are going to notice in Detroit. And I don't know that that's that way everywhere.
So first of all, when you talk about TV shows that kind of have to hold up to the original, I want to go with, I'm not too happy with the new Suits LA. I just want to go on record as saying that it's not as good as the original Suits. JB, how do you reflect on your first year in Detroit with the Tigers? And were you surprised by the immediate bond and love affair you created with the fans? Because holy smokes, people love you and love listening to you, and kind of discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, as I was talking about a moment ago, like I feel like Detroit really cares about its sports announcing, and all I've ever wanted was to be involved in that craft of sportscasting and have people care about the details. And that's how I grew up, through Syracuse and its radio station and all of that. And so to go to a place where the audience has an elevated sense of, here's what we want out of a sports announcer, and it can't just be, what we expect a sports announcer to be. Like, you can't be 50th percentile, or else people are just going to be like, yeah, we've had Ernie, sorry. We've had Ken and Mick, sorry. We've had, and insert anybody there. So, it pushes me to be in a place that cares about my job, our craft, the whole thing like that. And to watch what the Tigers did at the end of that season, and to be sitting there with a headset on and saying, okay, what amazing thing is going to happen now? How are they going to get out of trouble? And I know we've talked about TV shows already, but when it felt a little bit like when the title hero of the show gets in trouble at the 15-minute mark, he's not or she's not going to meet their end, right? Like, it's not going to be over for Superman after the first act break. And that's how I felt about the Tigers last year. Is like, oh, they're down 3-1, but the writers aren't going to let them, they're not going to die here. Like, that's not going to happen. And it turns out those Skubal starts against the Rockies and Athletics were very much just plot points, right? Like, they lose those 2 games and you're like, oh my goodness, I guess I was wrong. They are going to kill Walter White in the first season. And they didn't. That's not how it happened. So for me, it was such a joy watching that. But I promise you, I got into that mode where it was like, how are the Tigers going to get out of this today? And that feels bulletproof as a narrator. And when you have it in your mind that it's like, and because they've given you every piece of evidence that they are that quote unquote team of destiny, it is unbelievably fun to document, because it is this idea that they are just like every day lifting the bus off the person. And it was superhuman and nobody saw it coming. I didn't see it coming. Like I did an event with the Tigers about a month and a half ago and said to the audience, it was at the Motor City Casino, like, a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 people, like, how many of you thought the Tigers were going to make the playoffs at the beginning of September? And all the hands got raised. And I was like, liars, lies, all lies, didn't happen. Because like, but it's one of those, if you ask anybody who was at Game 7 of a World Series and you counted all the hands that got raised, it ends up being like 300,000 people. Well, that's a fire hazard. So like it was just such a joy to watch an underdog of underdogs do this, because, you know, as somebody who grew up loving the 13 seed winning in the NCAA tournament, this was that, but for a month.
Just for the record, I mean, I did book my honeymoon, so I would not be raising my hand in that situation.
How was it, by the way? Was it everything you wanted?
Oh my gosh. Greece was beautiful. Greece was beautiful. It was everything that we could have ever imagined, everything that we hoped for. But man, oh man, it's funny how some things work out, isn't it?
It really, really is. It is.
My personal favorite call from Jason Benetti in 2024, quote, "A city that doesn't care about the odds has a baseball team to match." End quote. It was September 26th after a 4-3 win over the Rays at Comerica Park, putting the Tigers on the doorstep of clinching a spot in the postseason. Let me play the audio here.
2-2. Tigers win again! A city that doesn't care about the odds has a baseball team to match.
Jason, I get the chills. Can you take us back to that call? Like, where does something like that come from?
First of all, the first thing that hits me that I love so much about play-by-play, and you could have played 100 announcers who I revere's call, and I would say the same thing, is that I just defy you to find anywhere else in sports, any other job that doesn't involve player, that just allows such emotion to bubble up while a game is happening. Like I'm sitting here in my office right now, and if I try to get to that level of energy on my own, it sounds superficial or artificial. But when you're in that moment and you're surrounded by 30,000 people and you have a partner next to you, couple partners and this whole crew, and you're just elevating each other and you're doing it for each other, and it's kind of a team bonding piece. It is something special to get that out of a human. And you know, like, you listen to the Do You Believe in Miracles, Al Michaels call, and all of these like seminal calls. And the thing that strikes me is like, you just can't get there on your own. And so the team gets us to this place. And then, you know, with that came out of my mouth, yeah, I think it's why I identify with Detroit broadly, is like, people have this opinion of the city and it's a really broad opinion and it's not ever really true. You know, like as I said, like as somebody who has rooted for underdogs, gee, wonder why, like in the NCAA tournament, like it makes a lot of sense to me to celebrate, especially in a world that feels like the big people are getting bigger and individual decisions are getting smaller and smaller, and it's tougher to push the boulder. And like, there are so many people who I definitely think about as we're doing these games who like just want to come home and watch a baseball game, because it's the one place during the summer after work that like something can be fun and easy. And like, if we're that and we can kind of be the same as the people who are at home in their sense of like, man, I just work 10 hours and for what sometimes? I think that happens across the globe. Is I just work 10 hours. I work my face off. And for what? And the answer is like for your family, for your future. And we know all that, but when we're in the middle of it and people are taking shots at us or whatever it is, like, you just want to let it out. And I think for this city that gets so often underestimated, but if you talk about it with people, all they want to talk about is the growth. I feel like I run into complete strangers in Detroit, and like, we're downtown, and one of the first things an Uber driver, a cab driver from the airport wants to talk about is like all this. Like, if they don't have any idea who I am, what I do, we get into these conversations, and like, all they want to do is point out this new building, that new building, this used to be something out. Like, that is, to me, in some ways, the ethos of this city. And so I adore that. I think it's one of the best traits to have, is to just keep going no matter what. And I feel like this team did that. Again, I have a pretty good radar for like underdogs that I should care about. I was one, and I missed this one. I had no idea it was coming. And so there's emotion in that too for me. And so that's where all that comes from. I appreciate you enjoying it. And I really do think that team and this city were made for each other.
I love hearing that. Last question on the broadcast. What are your expectations for things in 2025? You're going to be working a lot with Andy Dirks, Dan Petrie, Danielle LaBruce coming into the fold. What are some of your thoughts on the TV broadcast in the 2025 season for the Tigers?
Well, let me start with this. I was on here last year. How do you think the gauge of what I told you all might be coming actually was? Was I honest about that? And did we hit that range? Like, I'm not asking for like certification. I just am interested in your perspective. Like, was it rangy enough? Do you feel like it was? Was there enough range?
100%.
Then I would say, like, the fun of this is figuring it out as an us, and when there's a new us, like Andy and I have done some games together, but not 1,000. And Daniela and I have done some games together, but not 1,000. And Peaches and I have done some games together. And while it's more, it's not 1,000. And I hope you don't take my question as like, did we do it? Did we do it right? Didn't I tell you? That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean at all. I am really, as an individual, committed to range. And I think as a group, we are too. And I am very glad that the Tigers got hot late, because I do think if you cut out late August and early September and the rest of September, people might say that it was like too zany, or we didn't hit like enough big moments, or whatever it might be. But we had the opportunity late in the season to show as a group that we can nail those big moments, that it's not all fun and games, that it is like, when there's a serious moment, we are absolutely going to do it. But I can say that until I'm, hoodie blue in the face. But like, if we don't get to put it on tape, nobody gets to hear it. So I asked that question in part because I feel like we got fortunate at the end of the year that we had moments to show that when it's serious time, it really is serious time. And we are going to do total justice to that. It's just that when it's 9-1, we're probably going to hit each other with baseball bats. Like, that's just, that's going to happen.
But Jason, I think the most fun part for all of us listening to a broadcaster who has one of the most unique styles in baseball, which is, extremely fluent in all the nuance of the game, the data of the game, but at the same time has an uncanny ability to mix comedy and pop culture, and they make it all together. And it's like going to the best baseball restaurant while you listen to the game that you could possibly go to. It's amazing. So yes, maybe did it take a month for us to kind of understand the greatness of the meal? But, whether it's 9-1 or whether it's a come from behind 3-2 win, scoring 2 in the 8th, it doesn't matter, because the meal and the journey of the meal is always so different and so fun. So, when you ask, did you, accomplish what you promised? The answer is, hell yes, you did.
I don't know that I've ever heard a better comparison for what we do. So like, if I steal that on future podcasts, I will definitely cite you, Mark, but I have never learned to be a good cook. But I love Chopped, and I love The Bear, and I love the idea that you can make such magic with food. And you're so right. I'm kind of floored because it's one of those like, oh man, I look at food all the time and I never thought of that. That's a great comparison for what we do. And I really appreciate you guys saying that. I do. And we will work very, very hard every year to make sure that we are doing right by the audience in every moment. But that was a hell of a ride. I mean, it was a hell of a drug. It was like, there were nights after the game where I was like, I know I have to go to sleep because I'm going to be a fiasco tomorrow for that 1:00 and I'm not going to sleep. There's no amount of melatonin that could put you to sleep after some of those Tigers wins.
All right, Jason, we've talked for 20 minutes. We have yet to talk baseball, which is the essence of Jason Benetti, by the way.
No.
But let's talk about the Tigers in 2025. You got some expectations. You are traveling the country so much doing basketball. You can't sit there every day and watch every spring game, but I know, knowing you know exactly what's been going on down here. So what's your thoughts on the 2025 Tigers? Where do you think this is going? And, how is it different than last year? And there's a lot of expectations now.
There are from fans. I think from the team too. I think they expect more of themselves, and I think that's usually a really good thing. I am fascinated. One of the things I'm really fascinated by this year is how you make sure, and there have already, the stories about Kerry Carpenter trying to get better against lefties and stories of quote unquote platoon people skill sets, right? Not platoon people, but platoon skill sets, people trying to improve those skill sets, right? Where is the push and pull? And when do these players cross that threshold, or do they, or don't they, or is it always more valuable? And it very, very well could be. I'm not saying like it's a race for Kerry Carpenter to hit lefties, because I do think when you have righties who are really great against lefties, that is a tall threshold. Like trying to get me to be on the 400-meter team is like not a great idea, right? So like I'm not saying Kerry is that against left-handers. I would never pin that on anybody. But what I'm saying is like you want people who are great at the thing they're doing. And selflessness was the story of the season last year for the Tigers. But as players grow, they want to grow their skill sets. So how much do they push in terms of growth, right? The Tigers are truly, and we can see it in the farm system ranking coming out, the other day, a couple days ago, like #1 farm system. We see Jack Flaherty coming back. I think there's enough of a critical mass of evidence of like, people want to be with the Tigers because the Tigers are about growing skill sets. That is happening in front of our eyes. And it's a great thing to have in Major League Baseball in 2025. How do those skill sets grow? How do they push the manager? Or do they even push the manager? Because again, like if you have Andy Ibanez or Kerry Carpenter and there's a lefty, it's nothing against Kerry. It's nothing against Kerry in 7 years. Andy Ibanez is a torturer of left-handed pitching. That's what he's here for. And so I think that push and pull to watch over the course of the season and, the amount of self-belief that carries over from last year into this year, those are two really intriguing things. I think Jackson Jobe is so fascinating. He comes in the playoffs, the stuff clearly plays, but he's not as self-actualized. He's not as himself as we're going to see in a couple years down the road. So how close do we get to that this year? What do all these outfield injuries do to leverage the opening day roster? Who's going to play the outfield on opening day? How does the pitching shake out, with a lot of starters? How do you take the lessons of necessity from last year into this year when you don't have that same necessity in your starting rotation? How do you play that? How do you utilize it? I do think the Tigers were just so equipped strategically and got the feedback from the game that all this stuff worked, that I feel like there's a superhuman version of this where AJ can somehow even play more on the margins than he did last year, which to me is like a stupendously terrifying thought.
Well, take us inside AJ Hinch a little bit, because even when you mention Kerry Carpenter against left-handed pitching and you think about Andy Ibanez coming off the bench or Justin Henry Malloy coming off the bench, if you need a really big swing, those are two guys that thrive against lefties, whereas Kerry not so much. But is there anyone better to navigate that than AJ Hinch when you consider the way that he worked his magic with pitching chaos, bullpen matchups, pinch hitters? It was day in and day out last season. And then on top of that, he set the culture, and that's real.
It is very real. I was talking to a staff member from a Big Ten school in the last month, and we were just kind of broadly talking about baseball. And he goes, yeah, I don't think managers, I don't think they're worth that many wins. I was like, I didn't think so either until I watched the Tigers last year. I said to him specifically, though, we were talking about the Reds hiring Terry Francona is how it came up. And I think the world of Tito, and I do think he's worth wins. Absolutely. But I said to this guy, and I think this is a specific distinction that matters. I don't think managers who are going to play at all by the book add that many wins. I think managers who shatter the paradigm and are willing to color because of either their self-belief, their lockstep with the front office, or a combination thereof, and they're kind of playing with house money because they've had success before. I think when managers decide to change the paradigm and do things that are so infinitesimally small, but so impactful because they just change the way you think about the game, I think that's why you end up with AJ Hinch so extremely impacting this team, because he is very willing. I mean, he knows the rule book so unbelievably well. And he's very willing to say, yeah, I think this is better because this, and this. He's enumerated all of the trade-offs, and he calculates that in his mind. And it's in part because he was very open with us on the podcast, and he's talked to other people about it. It didn't work in Arizona. Then it did in Houston, and he's learned so many lessons, and he's learned so many different specific ways to manipulate a bullpen or another manager or whatever it is. I just think his combination of experience and intelligence allows him to take a sledgehammer to the paradigm, which allows him then to add value to the manager's chair, which is what exactly an owner wants when he hires a manager. He just doesn't know it and sometimes doesn't incentivize it. The Tigers have a situation where there's nobody pushing back against that because everybody wants it. I think AJ, in part, has been just fully deployed as the weapon that he is because of his own experience, but also because he's surrounded by people who want it and encourage it. There's nobody saying but he's kind of crazy for doing that. If the guy who coached Grinnell for a long time in college basketball, who was putting up 120 points a game, if his assistant coach and his AD were like, yeah, but what if we played pack line defense? Then suddenly you're not running it nearly as effectively because it's half measures.
But Jason, it's not just the baseball strategy that Hinch employs like a master. It's the people strategy. It's how he knows by August or September, because in April and May, he's given guys rope to see what they can do in certain situations. And he's tried to find out who's rising to the occasion, who maybe that matchup wouldn't be good for going forward. He just always gives guys an opportunity to prove to him they belong in certain situations, and then deploys that as the year goes on. And last year was a perfect example of those things. It's not just the baseball, it's the people management.
Yeah, he gets the player buy-in, and that's the difference. A lot of managers around the league, they wonder, how does he get his players to buy in the way that he does? Because that's not an easy thing to do, to get a room of guys, and not just the room that's in Detroit, but also the guys that are in Toledo coming up too, to get everyone to buy in and to be on the same page. That's masterful.
And I think part of the mastery, guys, is that's why you use somebody like Andy Ibanez for specific situations. The last thing anyone of us wants is to go to work and feel like we're a drone, right? Go to work, you churn out the work. Anybody with ambition who wants to grow in their job, right? Some people do really hard jobs because the money feeds their family, right? We are in fortunate enough positions where we get to go and talk about growth and all of this stuff, right? Sometimes a job is absolutely just a job, but I would dare say that even in the person in whatever the worst job in America is, they'd like every once in a while for their boss to say, hey, you're really good at that. It's just a human instinct to want to be recognized for like your ability to contribute to the group. And I think what AJ does and what Scott Harris and Jeff Greenberg afford him the leeway to do is use roster spots on really specific skill sets. But that means that every player comes to the ballpark and knows exactly how they can be part of the team. So when you deconstruct something like last season, you can pick out a moment for literally every player. And a moment in the future, if that series ends up going the way the Tigers want and they end up in the ALCS, you can pick out a moment in the future where AJ Hinch would say, your turn. We could right now write out a lineup card and draw out a moment for any guy who you would think would be the 29th guy, because everybody knows what their value is. And we only get to live life once. So we might as well have value every day that we're walking on this silly planet of ours. And I think that's where the magic comes in, right? It strategically is very smart to pinch hit for a lefty versus a lefty. And I've been talking about Kerry Carpenter because he's an easy piece of evidence to grab. But like anybody for anybody, you end up with the idea that you are actually part of this. And you're not just calcifying at the end of the bench. You're not just like utility player X who, because it's Sunday and, Garrett Cole's on the mound, like you're playing, good luck, you're 0 for 4. I don't think AJ, just reading between the lines of some of his stories from spring trainings in the past and not making teams, he didn't make enough teams where I'm sure he felt like he was skilled enough to be a part of it for varying reasons. They had a veteran, they had somebody on a contract, whatever it might be, that I just think he understands now that baseball sometimes discards people. And if you don't discard people, you can get a lot out of them and they will absolutely be loyal and dedicated to that craft because you have found the thing that they're really good at. It's not hard, but nobody does it. There's so many, you travel around baseball enough and you're going to hear a manager go, he stinks. Well, like what? But he's good at something. He's got to be good at something. He's on your roster. Like find the spot. Maybe he hits righty knuckleballs. I don't know. Like find him a chance to do that.
All right, Jason, we have, discussed the optimization of the bottom of the roster. Let's talk about the top of the roster. Talk to us about the best pitcher in baseball, Tarik Skubal. How fun was that to watch every start last year? And what do you think? How do you build on that going into this year? Because the expectations are going to be totally different. You won the Cy Young Award. You're the best pitcher in baseball, and you have to pretty much dominate every time you walk out there.
Well, the good news is his personality is such that I think he makes that happen for himself anyway. Like I do think that one of the best moments last year, and I haven't asked him specifically about this, sometimes it's just a little more fun to read between the lines, but that start right before the All-Star break, when he mowed down Elly De La Cruz and he screamed so loud, there had to have been a little bit of like, hey, that's your superhero? I'm one too. Like nothing against Elly De La Cruz, I don't think, but like, oh, everybody's talking about him? Yep, strike 3. Hope you enjoyed the fastball. Like, I think there's part of that in Tarik Skubal, and he is super competitive with himself, but he also I love when guys recognize who they're facing. I love when it's like there's a wide receiver, back in the day, it'd be like Jalen Ramsey or Darrelle Revis or Deion Sanders, like pick a corner. But I love when guys would be like, yeah, bring it on. Like, follow me all game. I think that's what we want to see as viewers, and that's why people are competitive. Like we want to see somebody inviting that level of hero versus hero. And so I think Tarik Skubal is 100% honest if he says, I don't care about expectations. Like, I don't. My expectations are mine for me, and I'm going to go out and dominate because I'm going to go out and dominate. And I think that's the joy of watching him. I do think there's some of that Michael Jordan Last Dance DNA in there. There's some of that, like, I'm going to get more mad at myself than anybody will ever get at me, or I will get at anybody else, even including Rolex buddy Jake Rogers. Like, I do think Tarik Skubal is a machine. And that, that's not to say there aren't pitfalls. That's not to say there aren't adjustments. Like, obviously, Kansas City had some success against him last year. So there's like one demon there, to not in the way that it's haunting him, but a pitfall landmine that he has to deal with next year. But he is such a joy to watch because he's what everybody wants out of themselves. Like, you hope to be able to go out into the world and have that much control, no matter what you believe in a higher power. Like, you just want to have that much control of your surroundings. And that's why he's a joy to watch for me.
Another guy at the top of the roster, Riley Greene. Do you think he can get MVP votes this season? That's something I'm watching for because it seems like he's on that trajectory when you look at decreasing the ground balls, increasing the fly balls, getting it to the pull side, drawing more walks. Like, maybe you cut down on the whiffs a little bit more and you can jump from great to elite. Do you think this is the year that Riley Greene goes from, hey, this guy's an all-star, to this guy could be a superstar?
I do. And I said it on the first spring training telecast. I just think he navigates so quietly through a Major League Baseball season that he doesn't get noticed. And I do think the Tigers doing what they did allows for that to happen more this year. I think we're going to see the benefits of last year's run a little more this year, because if the Tigers do win 3 or 4 in a row, we all know how this works. Nationally, it's going to be, here come the Tigers again. And then it's, here's the story of what they did last year. And it all kind of redoubles. And I had Steven Strasburg in AAA, I may have mentioned previously, but the one thing that I took from Steven more than anything when he was sort of a magnet there for attention is that once you have that attention, it never really goes away for you or your teammates as long as you sustain it somewhat. So I do think Riley is going to get more attention this year just inherently. And then I also, you talked about the whiff rate, and I think that's something obviously he was working on last year early with swing decisions, very well documented. But I do think when the offense struggles, the big names try to become RBI people. Not that RBI as a stat is like the most important thing. I don't think it's nothing either. But I do think that when you're scoring a run or 2 runs or 3 runs, like, I do think there's some added, I need to drive in a run. I need to do something here. And I would bet that just because of that happening less, hopefully, right? If the offense is good and the people around him are good and they're doing damage, I would bet that alleviates some of the chase from him and some of the swing and miss as well. And he can be even more patient with the way people pitch him. And I also do think, like, he'll get better pitches if the people around him are producing more as well.
You mentioned Steven Strasburg. How about Jackson Jobe? I mean, this is a guy who, rookie of the year, front runner. He's already being labeled as that. Is that kind of the expectation for this guy, considering the stuff that he has, the athleticism that he has? Drawing back on your experience with Strasburg, like, what are the expectations for Jobe now as he's coming into a situation where he's not pitching out of the bullpen in September or in October? He's going to be relied on as a starter and a guy that can, pitch deep into games at times and have really good stuff and lead the Tigers to a win. Just what are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, Steven was like a 7-act play, and it was part tragedy and part triumph. And there was so much in between. There was injury and there was frustration with the team, but there was also, self-made success and ace stuff and just galvanizing an entire nation's capital and everything that came along with it. I will say maybe the gift that gives the most from that call you played earlier is that I can just decline to talk about expectations because the Tigers bucked the odds in my first season and I said it. So I'm that guy anyway preseason who's like, well, let's see what happens to our trusty sidekick. That's the part of the season that gets me most excited. So I tend to not get too wrapped up in what we think is going to happen, which makes me a really bad question answerer on a podcast about expectations. But what I'm most interested to see is how Jackson Jobe does the long haul this year. Because we'll all be invited into the ups and downs of it. And then you come out of that tunnel, and what you end up with in the biggest moments, as we know, is what matters most. But I just think he's so well equipped. I think he's got self-belief, but it also comes from a foundation of just like being really good at this and really understanding pitch design and what he can do to hitters. And I do think he's just at the beginning of the tinkering process that, as we know, has had great success with the Tigers and pitchers in the past. So I'm more like, okay, deal the cards and let's see what everybody at the table has and what comes on the flop. And then we'll go from there. But what I'm most excited to watch is his reaction to the first run of tough starts and who comes to his aid, how they come to his aid, all of those sorts of things to make him a long-term success. And then I start talking like Scott Harris, right? And I just heard myself do it because it's like you are trying to plot for the future while you're plotting for today. And so I'm watching for the now because all he can be is this year in life, this year, right? But I'm also watching for those signs that he is going to figure it out in the future. But again, as baseball fans, I didn't know Colt Keith was going to dig himself out when he dug himself out. Like it felt like AAA was a possible destination when he was at the bottom of it, but he figured it out. And so the best moments for me are those turning points in a season where you think you saw, but you don't know for another month. So that I know that's a little bit vague, but like that's where my eyes are as this season moves forward with him specifically.
You know, Evan and I have talked about this, and we actually talked to Jobe on the pod. And what I'm fascinated by is not just how dynamic when you watch him now. I mean, my joke the other day or last weekend was I was literally bowing to the television after the first two innings of his, not the start yesterday, but the prior to start. It was just awe-inspiring to watch. But what I'm really interested to see is where are we in May, in the middle to the end of May, 7-8 starts deep. Maybe he's had a couple good, great ones, but he's had a couple that were a little rockier, people putting the ball in play when you didn't expect it. And the progression and the adjustment and the polish he adds to sequencing, to paying the price for mistakes, how he learns when he can bully hitters and when he can't. And I figure 7-8 starts, he's going to experience all these things. It's kind of like yesterday when he faced Vlad and he was finally mad about it. And he just threw 2 FU fastballs at the top of the zone and said, hit it. So, these are the lessons that are going to be fascinating to watch with Jackson Jobe, just as you described. That's what's really interesting to us, and I can't wait to see it.
And there's depth, right? And there's pitching depth, they feel like. We said that in spring training last year, so I'm a little hesitant, right? Because you don't know. You have it until you don't have it, right? But there are obviously choices. I think the Tigers, it was really smart when I saw the email across my screen yesterday, like the José Urquidy thing. That is like, that's not really a risk. Like 1 year, $1 million, and then the option for next year, like, okay, like, let's see what we have here. And I feel like with Alex Cobb at some point coming back, and it looks like Casey Mize throwing it pretty well in spring training. I'm at the point, it is March 9th as we're taping this. Can we please just roll the ball out? Like, I'm just like, cause you think we're looking for all these signs, and then how often do we talk about spring training once the season starts? We never talk about spring training. And I'm sorry, like, please watch on March the 12th and March the 17th and March the 21st when Dan's in. Like, please watch our spring training telecasts. We're going to have a good time and we're going to look for those signs. But like, I don't know. Like, let's just play. And especially so this year because it's the Dodgers on day one. Like, let's go play the Dodgers. Let's see where this is. Let's figure it out where it is right out of spring training. Like, let's have Skubal versus Yamamoto. Let's have fun with it and let's play. That's where I am right now. And I haven't even been down there that much. You've been there forever. And like, at some point, spring training is like, let's move on.
All right, Jason, that's all we have for you. But thanks for joining the Days of Our podcast. We are honored to be the first Tigers podcast that earned a second appearance from you. So I guess that means you don't hate me, or at least you like me just enough to come on the podcast a second time. So that's a win for me today. I'll take that one. But let's do this again sometime in the future, Matt. It's been a blast.
I feel like yearly in early March we're aiming towards. So no, this is great. Thank you, guys.
Put it on your calendar, all right? March 2026, we'll get you back.
Can I just say, people send me like calendar invites for meetings, and I am so far away from actual workplace like strategy. I have no idea how that stuff works. Like calendar invite, just like text me that I have to be on the Zoom. I would be really bad in a real job. I promise you that.
Hey, well, thanks for coming on, man. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone, that was Jason Benetti, the TV voice of the Detroit Tigers and one of the best sports broadcasters in the world. We have more to discuss about the Tigers in spring training, but first, let's take a break.
All I can say is, let's go back and talk to Benetti for another 45 minutes, because when is that not just the most fun thing to do ever? I mean, that was just an amazing discussion, and I hope everybody gets a chance to listen to Jason, because it's not often you can talk to a guy for 45 minutes and only 25% of the discussion feels like it's baseball. And it's still the funniest 45 minutes you will spend this week. So, all right, the Tigers have made 10 roster cuts this spring training. Who's been cut? I had a seance and a small wake for Matt Manning. Let's talk about who was cut and what could be coming next.
Yeah, Tigers optioned 4 players from the 40-man roster to AAA Toledo: Matt Manning, Tyler Owens, Chase Lee, and Tyler Madison. Tigers also reassigned 6 non-roster players to minor league camp: Wilmer Flores, Wilkel Hernandez, Eliezer Alfonso, Eddie Leonard, Ricky Benasco, and Ryan Miller. There are now 51 players in MLB camp, which is actually 48 players without including the 3 players on the 60-day injured list. The 2 notable names, obviously, right-hander Matt Manning and right-handed reliever Wilmer Flores. Matt Manning, number 9 overall pick in the 2016 draft. He was the Tigers' number 1 prospect in 2017, number 2 prospect in 2018, 2019, and 2020, and number 3 prospect in 2021, all according to MLB Pipeline. He made his MLB debut in mid-June 2021, and Matt Manning never lived up to the hype. A 4.43 ERA in 50 starts in his MLB career. He spent most of last season in AAA Toledo, which is where he will start this season. In spring training, he allowed 8 runs on 10 hits and 8 walks with 6 strikeouts across 6 innings in 3 games. Here's what AJ Hinch said, quote, "We talked a lot about his pitch usage, getting himself to trust his stuff in the zone, finding the right breaking ball, using his split more. It's a combination of things. He's just a small adjustment away from helping us," end quote. That was AJ Hinch on Matt Manning. As for me, I wonder how long it takes for the Tigers to move Matt Manning to the bullpen. The AAA season begins March 28th. We'll see if Matt Manning is a starter or a reliever. Probably going to be a starter, but at some point, I think they need to turn him into a reliever. As for Wilmer Flores, he was the Tigers' minor league pitcher of the year in 2022 and the number 3 ranked prospect in 2023. He's been on the injury report since the beginning of spring training with right shoulder inflammation. So he's basically just transferring his rehab work from big league camp to minor league camp. He missed most of last season with a shoulder injury as well, but when healthy, he was absolutely terrible. He had an 8.53 ERA with 24 walks and 23 strikeouts across 25 2/3 innings in 16 relief appearances. He is no longer ranked on MLB Pipeline's top 30 list for Tigers prospects. Once upon a time, Wilmer Flores was considered a lock to make his MLB debut in 2024, but 2024 has passed us by, and he's not a lock to make his MLB debut in 2025 anymore. So it's going to be an uphill climb for both Wilmer Flores and for Matt Manning if they want to get to the MLB level.
Matt Manning, 2 years ago, put together back-to-back years, at least when he was healthy, that was pretty damn good. Didn't strike out a lot of guys, but had a sub-4 ERA and had a really effective fastball, kind of along the lines of Joe Ryan on the Twins. And it's all gone now. It's just a giant mess. I wasn't even mad watching him the 2 times I saw him this spring. I was sad. It was really difficult to watch him. Couldn't really throw strikes, couldn't locate anything. I think threw 2 pitches with conviction the entire spring, and young man has something to work on. Wilmer Flores, yeah, that's too bad. I mean, could he come back as a reliever? Yeah, maybe, but there's a ton of guys that could come back as relievers. That's a really difficult one to watch too. Tyler Owens, probably the most impressive reliever that did not stay in camp, a guy that almost guaranteed, if he maintains the caliber of stuff in Toledo that he had this spring, probably the closer at Toledo, will pitch innings for the Detroit Tigers. Got a lot of funkiness to him, got a beard, got some hair, got 98, got a decent slider. Really like what we saw, and a hat tip to Scott Harris for acquiring him from Texas last year. They seem to do this a lot. They find fringy kind of guys, optimize them, and get use out of them. So I think we'll see Tyler Owens pitch for the Tigers sometime this summer. All right. It's a good idea that we get the heck out of here. So I still want to hope everybody got a chance to listen to the Benetti interview. It was just golden. All right. I want to remind everybody to rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and especially YouTube. You can always find us embedded in every single Evan Petzold article at thefreep.com. I'd like to thank the editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, the magic man, our producer, Robin Chan, my two amazing little boy grandsons, the soon-to-be mommy, Savannah Petzold. And until next week, peace.